Hey guys, tonight we slip out of our own century and straight into the damp, straw-scented world of a medieval castle courtyard. You're about to arrive as a teenage bride-to-be, packed off like fine china in a creaking cart, and your first sight of the looming walls will not exactly scream honeymoon getaway. This is the story of forbidden love versus forced marriage, but told as if you're right there. You probably won't survive this in one piece, at least not emotionally. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing the global bedtime map fill up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your hands ache from gripping the cart's wooden sideboard. The wheels thud into ruts on a rain-clotted road, each jolt a reminder that your family's carriage, for this big moment, is really a glorified hay wagon with a few sprigs of rosemary tied to the back. You can smell the rosemary, yes, but also the mule's breath and your own fear. The castle rises like a gray cliff. Its gatehouse teeth look ready to chew you up. You tug your cloak tighter, thinking of the tapestries at home where brides step demurely into gold-lit halls. In reality, the outer bailey is a noisy mashup of pigs, mercenaries, and dripping laundry. Even the guards have mud on their mail. A maid nudges you. "Smile, my lady," as if a grin will make you any less a political chess piece. Still, you try, a grimace that could double as a toothache. Mainstream historical fact. In many parts of Europe by the 14th and 15th centuries, noble daughters really were dispatched young, 12, 13, 14, to cement alliances. Church law said the legal age for marriage was 12 for girls and 14 for boys. Child bride wasn't an insult, it was a policy. You're right in that demographic sweet spot. Your cart rolls under the portcullis. Iron spikes hover overhead like an unpleasant comb. Water drips from a murder hole. You think, what if they just shut it now? Dark humor is your coping mechanism. Good, you'll need it. A steward greets you with the enthusiasm of a man cataloging sheep. "Welcome, lady." He glances at your dowry chest with more interest than at your face. Inside are linens embroidered by your own hands, a silver goblet engraved with your father's arms, and exactly 0 of your own hopes. Quirky tidbit time. To ward off evil spirits on a bride's journey, some regions had the cart preceded by villagers banging pots or tossing grain. Your escort skipped that step, but one scullion does spit over his shoulder as you pass. Superstition achieved. You're ushered into the lower hall to freshen up, which here means a wooden bench, a basin of cold water, and a towel stiff with lye soap. The maid unpins your travel hood. Your hair smells of horse sweat. You practice your court smile again. Upstairs, musicians rehearse a motet. Downstairs, the kitchen boy slaughters a goose. The whole castle feels like a stomach digesting a feast you haven't yet tasted. And somewhere in these walls waits the man you're supposed to call husband. You pause near a narrow window slit. Outside, the courtyard churns with preparation. In your mind, you drift back to a different face, the one who slipped you a sprig of lavender at the midsummer fair. Not the groom, the other one. Forbidden, ridiculous, but more real than this cold stone. You shake yourself. Focus. Historians still argue whether most medieval brides actually felt this sense of doom, or whether our modern imagination paints it darker than it was. The records are mostly written by men, clerics, lawyers, poets. Your own inner monologue will never be copied into a chronicle. A servant hands you a cup of watered wine. It tastes like metal. You sip anyway, pretending it's courage. Another maid adjusts your gown. "He's handsome," she whispers. You don't ask compared to what. The steward returns with instructions. You're to meet the groom formally in the great hall after vespers. Until then, you're shown to a chamber hung with tapestries of hunting scenes. Stags flee hounds. One dog has its jaws around a neck. The weaver captured the moment before death with almost cheerful precision. Nice dacre for a nervous girl. You set your dowry chest at the foot of the bed. The bed itself is more like a wooden stage with a mattress stuffed with straw and feathers. Curtains can be drawn for warmth or for ceremony. Yes, that's ceremony. Don't think about it yet. 3 light jokes so far. Let's add another. The maid points at a brass chamber pot and says, "Your new throne, my lady." You manage a laugh. She leaves you alone. You wander the chamber, tracing your fingers over the tapestry. The hound's eyes are done in tiny knots of black silk. You whisper to the stag, "Run." Outside, bells ring for vespers. You kneel to say a prayer, not sure which saint covers "Please get me out of this." Catherine, Margaret, or perhaps Cupid, though he's technically pagan and currently ignoring your messages. Another historical note. By late medieval times, brides of your rank were often literate enough to sign documents but seldom allowed to choose husbands. Consent existed in canon law but was in practice squeezed by family pressure. That's exactly your position, your signature waiting like a wax seal about to be pressed. A rap at the door. Time. You straighten your gown, pull your hood forward, and follow the maid down a spiral stair that smells of tallow and damp. The stone is worn concave by centuries of feet, each step a reminder you're part of a long line of compliant daughters. The great hall opens before you, banners, torches, a dais. The air tastes of smoke and spiced wine. Minstrels pause mid-tune. All eyes shift. You take one careful step onto the rush-covered floor. The reeds crunch under your slippers. You imagine they're whispering advice. There he is, the intended groom. But that's Section 2's territory, the first glimpse. For now, you're still in the moment of arrival, the breath before collision, the space where your life might still fork. You inhale the scent of roasting meat mixed with beeswax candles. Your heart hammers louder than the drum at the end of the hall. In some alternate world, you're a miller's daughter, free to flirt at fairs. In this one, you're a pawn approaching the king's square. You remember the lavender sprig hidden in your bodice. You press it, feel the dry crumble. Tiny purple bits cling to your fingers. You rub them off before anyone notices. Another fringe tidbit. Some brides carried herbs not just for fragrance, but because they believed certain plants could make a groom more affectionate, or less potent, depending on how you brewed them. Not that you dare, but the idea flickers like a candle. Your name is announced. The hall echoes it back. In that instant, you sense the walls as a kind of mouth and yourself as something swallowed. Yet you also feel, absurdly, a spark of defiance. You lift your chin. And here's our open scholarly debate phrase woven again. Historians still argue whether young noblewomen developed quiet strategies of resistance, subtle refusals, delayed consummations, secret lovers, or whether those are modern projections onto a system that allowed little room for choice. Tonight, standing on the rushes, you wonder which story you'll end up embodying. A page kneels, offering you a posy of wintergreen and rosemary. Another sign of welcome or maybe of control. You take it anyway. The steward gestures toward the dais. You walk forward, each footstep loud in your ears. The torches flare. The minstrels pick up a soft tune again, a melody about Saint Agnes, patron of virgins and, ironically, of betrothed girls. You reach the foot of the dais and stop. The air between you and the groom is still a veil. That unveiling, the real first glimpse, belongs to the next moment, the next section. For now, you're simply the bride at the gates, no longer outside, not yet inside, already traded, not yet claimed. The castle has closed around you like a book, and you're only on the first page. The hall seems to exhale as you stand there, eyes adjusting to the glow of torches and the shimmer of banners. This is the first true look at the man chosen for you, your intended groom, and the moment your stomach, heart, and every rational thought try to run in different directions at once. He rises from the dais slowly, as though rehearsed. His tunic is a dark green wool trimmed with miniver. His belt buckle catches the firelight like a coin tossed by fate. You realize he is taller than you pictured from the letters your father's steward read aloud. But letters can't capture a voice, a smell, or the way someone's gaze lands. Your own eyes dart, cheeks ruddy from hunting, a faint scar near the temple. You catalog details because that's safer than cataloging your feelings. He bows, you curtsy. Your knees don't buckle, but it's a close call. You murmur the scripted greeting. He repeats it. There is a brief, awkward silence, the medieval equivalent of buffering. Then he gestures for you to sit at the long table to his right. You move like a marionette, half aware of the rushes underfoot and the scent of wood smoke in your hair. Mainstream historical fact time. In the 15th century, most noble marriages were arranged months or years in advance, often sealed by proxy ceremonies. It wasn't unusual for bride and groom to meet only once or twice before the wedding itself, so your fluttering panic is historically accurate. You sit, he sits. Servants glide in with trenchers of bread and little dishes of salt. He tries small talk. Your journey was pleasant, you nearly laugh. Pleasant like a leeching session, but you nod politely. He studies you while you study the hall. Banners show his family's arms, a boar rampant, a motto in Latin that roughly means steadfast, not tender, encouraging. Across the hall, a group of minstrels tunes their lutes. One begins a song about Tristan and Isolde, famous lovers doomed by circumstances. You wonder if someone requested it on purpose, like a medieval DJ trolling the crowd. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. Some nobles actually hired poets to compose flattering verses about their betrothals, blending propaganda and romance. If anyone's writing about you tonight, it's probably less poetry, more inventory. How many acres, how much dowry, how fertile your family line. Your groom clears his throat. I hear you enjoy falconry. That was on the list your father sent, skills, virtues, hobbies. You nod. You also enjoy breathing, freedom, and not being bartered, but that didn't make the list. He smiles a little uncertainly. You catch a whiff of cloves on his breath. He's chewed them to freshen it, a small sign he cares about this moment. The tiniest softness flickers under all the duty. For a heartbeat, you see a man, not just a transaction. You imagine the other face again, the one from the fair, the one whose touch left a spark. Compared to this hall of obligations, that memory feels like sunlight on a hidden glade. But you tuck it away quickly. The walls have ears. Servants pour wine. The cup is heavy. You sip. He sips. A thin smile passes between you like a note. Then he begins describing the lands you will oversee, the dairy herds, the tenants, the small chapel on the hill. His voice steadies as he talks estate management, clearly his comfort zone. Historians still argue whether young brides like you found genuine companionship with their arranged husbands or mostly lived parallel lives. Some chronicles hint at partnerships of respect, others at cold duty. You can't tell yet which path you're on. A herald reads out the betrothal contract. Latin phrases float above your head like strange birds. You catch only a few words: terra, dotum, filii, land, dowry, sons. Your future summarized in 3 nouns. Another quirky fact. In some regions, the bride's dowry was paraded through the streets before the wedding, a kind of medieval unboxing. You're relieved yours stayed in its chest. Your groom lowers his voice. You seem tired. Understatement of the century. We can retire soon if you wish. The hall's noise blurs, torches sputter. Somewhere a dog barks. You nod, unsure whether retire means to a chamber for rest or to that ceremony you're dreading. He seems to sense your hesitation. Only to talk, he adds. Nothing more until the priest blesses us. A tiny drop of tension leaves your shoulders. Maybe this man, this stranger, isn't eager to humiliate you either. You're led to a smaller solar, a room with a carved fireplace and a narrow table. 2 goblets of mulled wine await. He sits opposite you, fingers laced. You study the tapestry behind him, knights chasing a boar. Symbolic much. He speaks softly now. You are far from home. You nod. He says, I am also far from myself. That line isn't scripted. For a moment, you glimpse loneliness in him the same as yours. You toy with the lavender sprig hidden at your bodice. You don't dare place it on the table. Instead, you inhale it subtly, grounding yourself. Another historical note to weave in. While noble marriages were arranged, the church technically required the consent of both parties for validity. Canon lawyers debated endlessly what counted as free consent under parental pressure. Your situation is the living test case. You say carefully, I will do my duty, he nods. As will I, two actors reading lines, yet behind the lines two lives breathing. You remember your friend's whispered warning. Once the vows are said, your property transfers, your body becomes his right, and producing an heir becomes your only secure power. But also that some brides carved out influence, running estates, mediating disputes, even acting as regents. Historians still argue whether that influence was real power or just delegated drudgery. He asks about your embroidery. You mention you stitched hawks and vines. He chuckles. Then you will find our meadows full of both. Another flicker of warmth. Servants re-enter to announce the evening prayer. He stands, offers his arm. You hesitate, then take it. The sleeve is rough wool, surprisingly warm. As you walk back toward the chapel, you notice how the torches cast twin shadows, yours and his, stretching ahead. They almost look like two people holding hands freely. Almost. You pass a side door ajar. Through it you glimpse a kitchen boy tacking up a new poster of St. Valentine, the unofficial patron of lovers, already popular though not yet commercialized. The irony makes you smile. 3 jokes per 1,000 words. Here's one more. You think, Hallmark hasn't even been invented and I'm still in a Valentine drama. The chapel smells of incense and damp stone. You kneel. He kneels. The priest drones a psalm. You close your eyes, letting the chant wash over you. Your mind drifts to a place where you're neither pawn nor bride, just a girl at a fair, lavender in hand. A bell rings. Vespers end. He whispers, tomorrow we will ride the boundary of the estate. I want you to see it before the wedding. The offer surprises you. Most brides weren't shown the land until after. Maybe he's trying. You whisper back, I would like that. As you stand, you catch a reflection of yourself in a polished shield on the wall. The face looking back is pale, but the eyes are steady. Another fringe tidbit to slip in. Some medieval brides secretly visited local wise women before the wedding to get charms, some for fertility, some for preventing it, some for courage. You think of the old woman at the edge of your village who gave you this lavender and whispered, for clear sight. Maybe it's working. You leave the chapel side by side. The hall is quieter now, servants clear trenchers. The musicians have drifted off to the buttery. The castle feels like it's holding its breath. He walks you back to your chamber door. Sleep well, he says. Not my lady, not yet, just sleep well. You manage a small smile. Inside, the fire has burned low. You sit on the edge of the straw-stuffed mattress, unpinning your veil. The room smells of goose fat from dinner, beeswax from candles, and a faint echo of cloves. You replay the evening in your head. The hall, the banners, the scar near his temple, the unexpected softness in his tone. Still a stranger, yes, but maybe not a monster. You draw the bed curtains for privacy. In the dimness, you hold the lavender sprig up to the candle. Its shadow dances on the cloth like a secret signature. You think of the other face once more, and of the impossible triangle you're in. Forbidden love on one side, forced marriage on the other, and you balancing in between like a tightrope walker with no net. You slip the sprig under your pillow, a childish act but comforting. Outside, an owl hoots. You wonder if it's an omen of wisdom or just an owl doing owl things. Before sleep takes you, you make a silent vow, not the priest's vow, but your own, that somehow you'll keep a piece of yourself intact inside these walls. Historians still argue whether medieval brides had interior lives rich with resistance or quietly accepted their fates. You know where you stand, even if no one writes it down. The fire pops. Shadows curl like ink across the tapestries. You close your eyes and imagine dawn, horses saddled, the estate boundary ride. One more night as the almost bride. And somewhere out there, a boy with a lavender stall at a midsummer fair might be looking at the same moon, wondering what became of you. The rooster hasn't even thought about crowing when the maid shakes your shoulder. Her breath smells of onions and haste. Up, my lady, ride with my lord at sunrise. You pry your eyes open, momentarily unsure which stone ceiling you're staring at. Then you remember the lavender under your pillow, the man with the scar, and the day ahead. Your fingers are stiff as you lace your gown. The fabric is heavier than yesterday's traveling dress, dyed a muted blue that in better light might look like the sky. You think about how color works differently in this world. Blue as a sign of piety, green for fertility, red for power. You wonder which shade would make you invisible. The maid hands you a thin oat cake and a sip of watered ale. Medieval breakfast of champions. You swallow, your throat still rough from sleep and nerves. Outside, horses clatter on cobbles. A groom shouts something about girths and stirrups. When you step into the courtyard, the dawn is misty, the kind of pale gray that feels like walking through milk. Your intended groom is already mounted, cloak wrapped tight, a hawk perched on his glove. Of course, falconry at sunrise, the aristocratic version of a coffee run. He inclines his head. Good morning. The hawk tilts its head too, as if echoing him. You manage a smile. A page helps you onto a mare whose ears flick back at your tremble. You whisper a soft easy in the dialect of your village. Hopping horses are bilingual. The party rides out through the outer gate, across a drawbridge slick with dew. Below, the moat reflects the sky like a dull mirror. You feel the moment like a threshold. You've left the walls, but not the duty. The path bends toward rolling fields dotted with sheep. Mainstream historical fact. It was common for noble estates to cover several villages, each owing rents and labor. Brides like you often became the de facto managers when husbands were off at war or court. In other words, you're touring your future workplace. You inhale the smell of damp earth and horse sweat. A lark springs from the grass. For a few minutes, the rhythm of hooves almost lulls you into calm. Almost. He speaks over his shoulder. Those woods mark the boundary to the south. You nod. Our tenants gather firewood there by custom. He points out a low hill with a crumbling stone cross. Beyond that, the abbey's land begins. The way he says our and abbey sounds like chess pieces clicking. You risk a glance at him. In the pale light, he looks younger, less carved from duty. The hawk's feathers catch the dawn. You wonder what it would feel like to be that hawk, hooded, tethered, yet still able to soar when released. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. Some brides on their first estate tour carried little books of omens, interpreting crows, moles, or cloud shapes as signs of their future. You didn't bring one, but the mist itself feels like a blank page waiting for scribbles. Your groom slows his horse to ride alongside you. You ride well. The compliment surprises you. You answer lightly, better than I embroider boars. He chuckles, a real laugh this time. For a few heartbeats, the tension eases. He gestures toward a cluster of cottages with smoke curling from thatched roofs. Our people, he says. They'll want to see you. And sure enough, as you approach, a few villagers step out, bowing, curious. A child peeks from behind a doorframe, eyes wide. You dismount, your legs wobbling. The child offers you a posy of daisies. You take it, heart pinched. No lavender here, just field flowers. You thank the child in the local tongue. The mother looks startled and pleased. Historians still argue whether noblewomen genuinely connected with their tenants or merely played the role of gracious lady. In this moment, you feel a flicker of connection. Real or not, it steadies you. Your groom watches, expression unreadable. Then he says softly, they'll look to you when I'm away. You blink. The phrase, when I'm away, lands like a door ajar. War, court, escape. He He remounts, you remount, and the procession continues. The path climbs toward the forest edge. Sunlight spears through the mist, turning spider webs into silver nets. You think of the tapestry in your chamber, the stag, the hounds, and hope you're not the one being chased. He points to a crumbling stone tower barely visible among trees. Old watch post, he says. Some say built by Romans. A breeze carries the smell of pine and something sweet you can't name. Another quirky tidbit. In some regions, brides visited sacred springs or wishing stones during their first days on the estate to secure fertility or luck. There's a mossy boulder near the path with a hollow filled with rainwater. You wonder if anyone ever made wishes there. You pass a group of swineherds. One doffs his cap. Another mutters something about a lady too young. You pretend not to hear, but the words stick. Too young. Yes. Your groom notices. They mean no harm, he says. You answer. Words can still bruise. He glances at you, a flicker of apology in his eyes. The trail narrows under oak branches. Birds chatter overhead. You brush against leaves, their dew soaking your sleeve. The hawk stirs, wanting to fly. Your groom lifts the jesses slightly, calming it. Soon, he murmurs to the bird. You think, does he ever murmur like that to people? The party halts at a small clearing where a wooden cross stands crooked. Boundary, he announces. Beyond this is disputed land. He dismounts, drives a spear into the soil, a gesture of claim. The hawk shifts. Historians still argue whether these boundary rituals were legal formalities or half-pagan performances lingering under Christian guise. Either way, you're witnessing one. He kneels, touches the earth, then looks up at you. This is what I wanted you to see, not just stone walls, but the living ground. For a moment, his eyes are open, unguarded. You dismount and kneel too, palm on the damp soil. The earth is cool, gritty. You feel a tremor of belonging, or maybe of surrender. He says quietly, I was married by proxy once to a girl who died before we met. The confession startles you. I'm sorry, you say. He nods. So am I, he stands, brushes off his knees. I don't want ghosts between us. You stand, heart pounding. Forbidden love flickers in your memory, the fair, the boy, the lavender. But here's this man revealing his own loss. The triangle shifts shape. The hawk suddenly flares its wings. He releases it. The bird arcs into the sky, a dark arrow against the morning. You watch until it vanishes beyond the trees. Another fringe tidbit. Hawks released like this sometimes return days later, or never at all. Falconers kept detailed records of each bird's temperament, as if managing a roster of unpredictable souls. You wonder which record you'll fit into. The sun climbs. Shadows shrink, he says. We should return before the heat. You nod, mounting again. The ride back is quieter. Villagers wave. Children run alongside for a stretch. You pass the mossy boulder again. On impulse, you lean down, dip your fingers in the rainwater, and touch it to your forehead. The maid gasps softly. You just smile. Wish made. Back through the drawbridge, back into the castle mouth. The portcullis rises like a yawn. Inside, the courtyard bustles with wedding preparations, fresh rushes, barrels of ale, a spit turning with whole pigs. The smell makes your stomach both growl and twist. He dismounts and hands the reins to a groom. Thank you for riding, he says. You curtsy. Thank you for showing me. For a heartbeat, you stand close, the world narrowed to hoofbeats fatting and the scent of pine still on your cloak. Then duty floods back maids, stewards, priests. He turns toward the hall. We'll dine at noon, he says. After, the priest will speak with you about tomorrow. Tomorrow, the word clangs like a bell. You climb the stair to your chamber, the daisies from the child still in your hand. You set them beside the lavender on your table, field and fair, two halves of a heart. Outside, a hawk cries. Inside, you draw a long breath, bracing for the next ritual in this strange dance between duty and desire. You lie awake long after the castle settles into its midnight hush, straw-stuffed mattress creaking beneath you. the scent of tallow smoke still clinging to your hair. Somewhere below, a kitchen boy scrubs the last of the trenchers, and you can hear the faint hiss of damp logs on the hearth. This is the hour when the servants sleep, and the walls themselves seem to breathe. And it's also the hour when your thoughts slip their leash. You can almost pretend you're back at your parents' hall, watching moths circle a candle, while your older sisters teased you about the suitors you'd never meet. Now you're here, betrothed to a man whose smile is all duty and no delight, and you wonder what parts of yourself you're allowed to keep. A soft scratch at the door startles you upright. At first you think it's a rat. Then another sound, a tiny folded square of parchment pushed under the gap. You kneel, heart thudding, and slide it into your palm. The wax seal is nothing like your groom's crest. Instead, a tiny drawing of a sprig of rosemary, the herb of remembrance, pressed into red wax. No name, just a line in hurried script. The stars above see you, I see you. You're not supposed to have secret notes, not here. Girls in your position could be banished to a convent for less. Historians still argue whether these clandestine communications were common among noblewomen or just the stuff of troubadour fantasies, but your pulse tells you this is no poem sung at a distance. Someone within these stone walls is reaching out. You glance at the door. No footsteps. The corridor beyond is dark. You ease back onto the bed, the note hidden inside your sleeve. A memory surfaces. During your journey here, a stable boy helped you mount your horse, his hands careful but sure, eyes flicking up to yours only once. Could it be him? Or the young scribe who read the banns at the chapel? In a castle, messages travel faster than you'd expect. Even the laundresses know who quarrels with whom before the quarrel is finished. Morning brings a blur of instruction. Your ladies fuss over you like you're a porcelain chalice, hair to be plaited, new gowns to be tried. Over the drone of their chatter, you catch snippets of gossip. A merchant's daughter in the next county ran away with a minstrel and was caught at the border. Her family had her marriage annulled and sent her to a priory for contemplation. The story is told with a little shudder, as if to warn you. You smile politely, but inside you're measuring distances, to the priory, to the forest, to anywhere. That evening you sit at a long table beneath antlered chandeliers. Venison glistens, wine steams, and your betrothed speaks about land disputes as if reciting a prayer. Across the hall, a juggler tosses knives that catch the firelight. The castle's scribe bends over a parchment nearby, but when he straightens, you catch the briefest flash of a rosemary sprig pinned to his sleeve. Your spoon trembles. You lower your gaze, cheeks hot. If anyone notices, they think it's the wine. Later, back in your chamber, another note appears. This one arrives rolled into the hollow of a reed pen left on your writing desk. You open it, hands shaking. Meet at the old chapel door after Compline. Bring courage. The handwriting leans forward, urgent, like someone running downhill. Your ladies-in-waiting snore softly. Outside, the corridor creaks. You slip on a cloak. The old chapel sits at the edge of the bailey, half swallowed by ivy. Its stained glass saints have lost their faces to time. You push the door open. The smell of damp stone and beeswax hits you. A figure steps from the shadows, the scribe. He bows slightly, eyes wary but warm. He's younger than you thought, his fingers ink-stained. He whispers your name, your real name, not the one they'll add to you when you marry. For a moment, the world tilts. You're no longer a pawn in a dowry game, but a person who can be seen. He tells you he writes letters for many in the castle, contracts, sermons, even love poems for knights too shy to court their sweethearts. He's seen your betrothal documents, the clauses about heirs and estates. They've written your future already, he says, but you can still write something of your own. He presses a small wooden token into your hand, a carving of a ship, its sails full. If you ever need to leave, he murmurs, show this to the reeve at the port. Then he's gone, footsteps swallowed by the night. You return to your chamber trembling, the ship token burning a hole in your palm. Medieval marriage, you know, is not just vows and veils. It's property law, bloodlines, alliances sealed with flesh. The church preaches consent, but in practice, families maneuver around it like chess players. Even your confessor once hinted that obedience brings virtue, and that virtue brings heaven. Yet here you are, with a token of escape carved by ink-stained hands. The days blur into a dangerous rhythm. Publicly, you play the docile bride-to-be. Privately, you and the scribe trade messages in the margins of psalters or the knots of embroidery. You learn to read his tiny codes: a bird for meeting, a star for caution. He tells you fragments of news: a famine in the south, a bishop arguing that girls under 12 should not be wed. Historians still debate whether such decrees were widely enforced. These facts drip into your ears like another language, one of possibility. One afternoon, as you supervise the stitching of your wedding mantle, you realize the embroidery itself could be a message. Medieval brides often used symbolic motifs: pomegranates for fertility, dogs for loyalty. You ask for a small ship stitched near the hem to remind me of my father's voyages. The seamstress nods, unaware of your true reason. Later, when you twirl before the mirror, the ship glints at ankle level, a secret sailing along with you. Of course, not all secret messages are romantic. Some are traps. A laundress warns you that another lady-in-waiting suspects your late-night walks. The castle, she says, has more ears than a field of wheat. You start to vary your routes, meeting the scribe only in the crowded chapel where whispers blend with prayers. The tension sharpens you. Even your betrothed notices your new composure, mistaking it for maturity. Then one rainy dusk, the scribe hands you a parchment thicker than usual. Read it when you're alone, he says. That night you unroll it to find not a note but a map. The port, the name of a merchant ship, a departure date. Your hands go cold. Escape is no longer a daydream scribbled in margins. It's a plan with ink and wax. You set the map aside and stare at the ceiling. The rushes on the floor smell of lavender to mask the damp, but underneath you catch the moldy scent of old choices. Could you really run? Girls have tried. Some made it, disguised as pilgrims or even boys. Others were dragged back and locked away. Medieval chronicles rarely record the ones who disappeared successfully. Silence can be its own kind of freedom. Historians still argue how many women actually eluded forced marriages. For you, the question is no longer theoretical. A week before the wedding, a comet streaks across the night sky. The household gathers in the courtyard, pointing, murmuring omens. Your betrothed declares it a sign of good fortune for your union. The scribe catches your eye and you see something else, a tail of fire marking the path you might take. Later, back in your chamber, you find one more message tucked beneath your pillow. Soon, choose. The choice hangs over you like the tapestries in the great hall, heavy with stories of knights and saints. You run your fingers over the ship token. The carved sails feel like wings. Your nights grow sleepless again. You think of your sisters, of the stable boy, of the scribe's ink-stained hands. You imagine a life in some coastal town, copying manuscripts or teaching children their letters, your name your own. But you also imagine the wrath of your family, the shame they'd broadcast, the convent cell where you might end up if caught. Even the church's canon lawyers, men who debate the finer points of consent, would likely side with your father. Medieval law is a net with few holes. On the eve of your wedding, the castle rings with preparations. Spices poured into wine, hounds chased from the hall, musicians tuning lutes. Amid the bustle, you slip away to the chapel one last time. The scribe is there, his face pale. "Tonight," he whispers, "the tide is right. If you don't come, the ship sails without you." His voice trembles, not from fear but from urgency. "You don't owe me anything," he adds, "but you owe yourself a chance." You stand in the dim light, the saints' blank faces staring down. The smell of damp stone wraps around you like a cloak. Somewhere in the castle, your wedding dress waits, its little ship sailing along the hem. Somewhere beyond the walls, an actual ship rocks at anchor. You close your eyes. The note in your sleeve feels heavier than parchment. Your breath comes slow, like a prayer you haven't yet said aloud. The wedding morning arrives before the sky even begins to pale. You're woken not by birds, but by the flutter of maids pulling open shutters, their chatter a high-pitched braid of excitement, envy, and a hint of pity. The air smells of beeswax, damp linen, and rosewater poured into your bath to sweeten you for the groom. You sit motionless while warm water laps against your skin, trying to memorize the freedom of this last private moment. Even the smallest sound, A spoon clinking in the kitchen far below feels like part of a countdown. Your dress lies on a wooden stand nearby, a mountain of velvet and pearls. By medieval standards, it's a marvel. Hand-dyed cloth costing more than a peasant's yearly rent, little gold plaques stitched into the cuffs, and of course the small ship at the hemline that you insisted on for father's voyages. You run your fingers over that hidden emblem now. The needlework is so fine that from a distance it's just a swirl of blue thread. Up close, it's a vessel cutting through waves, a talisman stitched in fear and defiance. While you're laced and pinned, the older of your ladies tells you a story to calm your nerves. She recalls a noblewoman who refused her arranged marriage and took refuge at a shrine. The groom's family besieged the church until she relented. Historians still argue whether the tale is cautionary or legendary, but the point lands like a needle. Obedience means survival. You nod politely, your mind already slipping to the scribe's last words, "Tonight, if you don't come, the ship sails without you." You're led through a warren of corridors smelling of rushes and damp stone. Everywhere people fuss over details, pages carrying candlesticks, a steward shouting about missing spices, dogs barking at the noise. At the great hall's threshold the noise swells, lutes strumming, trumpets blaring, voices chanting Latin. You step inside and every head turns. The medieval wedding was as much a public contract as a sacrament. This one feels like a market day dressed in satin. Your groom stands waiting at the foot of the altar. His tunic is crimson, his smile thin as parchment. He bows and you curtsy, the weight of your veil pressing against your shoulders like another hand. You notice how his gaze slides not to your face but to the line of retainers behind you, as if counting assets. A small, bitter joke surfaces in your mind. At least he isn't ogling the dowry chest. You nearly smile at your own gallows humor but catch yourself. The priest drones in Latin, a river of words you've been schooled to repeat. Canon law technically requires consent, the famous "do you will?" But the pause before your answer is so brief it might be mistaken for a breath. You speak the words as if they belong to someone else. Outside, bells peal. Inside, 1,000 candles gutter. The smell of tallow and incense thickens until your head spins. A quirky tidbit the scribe once shared flashes back now. In some regions, brides used to wear their hair loose to signal virginity, but the church gradually shifted the custom so veils covered everything. Like a soul disappearing, he joked. You glance at your veil's edge and think how much it resembles a shroud. When the ceremony ends, the hall erupts in cheers and the musicians strike up a dance. Platters of meat and sugared almonds arrive. Goblets slosh with spiced wine. This is the feasting under watchful eyes you've been warned about. You sit at the high table, smiling as people toast your union. In the crowd you catch a glimpse of the scribe near the minstrels. His face turned just enough for you to see his expression, not joy, not despair, but a steady kind of waiting. It steadies you too. Every bite of food tastes of ash. You remember another of his whispered facts, bedding rituals. In some courts, the newlyweds were escorted to the marriage bed with witnesses to ensure consummation. Even nobles dreaded the humiliation. Your stomach knots at the thought. Yet here you are, the crowd already joking about the night ahead, servants laying bets under their breath. You sip your wine, hiding your trembling hand. As dusk falls, torches are lit. Guests grow louder, the hall hazy with smoke and laughter. You endure the endless toasts, the sly comments, the little performances of loyalty. Somewhere a dog snarls over a bone. Somewhere else a minstrel sings a ballad of courtly love that would be funny if it weren't so close to your own secret. You can't help but think of the ship at anchor, its sail catching the evening wind. Finally, the steward announces it's time for the bedding. A cheer goes up. You feel your face freeze into a mask. Two ladies take your arms, guiding you toward the private chambers. But the corridor they choose runs close to the chapel. Your heart races. This is the only moment when you're neither fully guarded nor fully alone, a crack in the fortress routine. You murmur that you need to pray before the bed, a pious custom no one can forbid. The ladies exchange a glance and allow it, settling on a bench outside the chapel door. Inside, the candlelight flickers across damp stone. The scribe steps from behind a pillar, cloak pulled tight. He says nothing, just presses the ship token back into your hand, heavier now as if weighted with decision. "You don't have to come," he whispers, "but the tide turns at midnight." He slips a hooded cloak over your wedding gown, its dark wool swallowing the velvet and pearls, and leads you to a postern door. For a heartbeat you hesitate, the voices of your family, your confessor, your groom all crowding your mind. Even now you could go back, kneel for a blessing, submit to the ritual. That path would be hard but known. This one is unknown and possibly lethal. Historians still debate how many women truly escaped forced marriages. The chronicles mention a handful, but silence swallows the rest. You take a breath that feels like the first you've owned all day. Then you step forward. The postern door creaks open. Cold air hits your face, salty and sharp. The castle's outer yard is nearly empty, a single guard dozing by a brazier. You slip past, the scribe a shadow at your side. Down a narrow path through a gap in the wall, and suddenly you're in the open fields, the night vast above you. Your wedding veil snags on a thorn bush and tears. You leave it fluttering like a ghost behind you. The path to the port twists through marshland. Reeds hiss in the breeze, frogs croak like distant drums. You remember a childhood tale of selkies luring girls to drown, a story your nurse used to keep you from wandering near the water. Now you welcome the sound of waves, the promise of the ship. Your shoes sink in mud, your heart pounds. Yet amid the fear, a laugh bubbles up, soft, incredulous. A second joke for the night. You probably won't survive this, but at least you're running on your own feet. At the quay, a single lantern swings from a post. A merchant ship rocks gently, its name painted in flacking gold. A burly reeve waits near the gangplank. You hand him the token without a word. He glances at it, then at you, then nods once. No questions. Perhaps he's done this before. Perhaps the world has more secret corridors than the chronicles admit. The scribe clasps your hands briefly. "If you wish, I can come," he says. "If you'd rather go alone, I'll stay." His voice is steady, but his eyes search yours. For a moment you see all the possible futures, convent, castle, coast, overlapping like stained glass. You step onto the gangplank. He follows. The deck creaks under your weight, and the smell of tar and salt rises like a blessing. Below deck a small cabin waits, a pallet of straw, a jug of water. It's rougher than any room you've slept in, but it's yours. Through a crack you glimpse the shore receding, the castle shrinking to a silhouette. Your torn veil still flutters on the thorn bush, a ghost of the bride who stood there. You sit cross-legged on the pallet, heart still hammering. The scribe sets down a bundle of manuscripts, psalms, legal treatises, a blank book. "In case you want to write," he says softly. The ship's bell rings. Sailors shout. The vessel leans into the tide. You feel the motion under you like the heartbeat of a giant animal, carrying you somewhere beyond the edge of the map. For the first time all day, you let your shoulders drop. You're not safe, not yet. Storms, pursuers, and hunger all lie ahead. But the wedding dress under the cloak still smells of rosewater and beeswax, a reminder of the life you just stepped out of. You press your palm to the embroidered ship at the hem. 2 ships now, one stitched in silk, one made of oak, both sailing away from the fortress. Above deck, the stars wheel in silence. One streaks across the sky, maybe the same comet, maybe a new one. You think of all the girls left behind in halls and cloisters, of the stories that never make it into chronicles. You whisper a prayer for them and for yourself. The words are simple: "Let me steer my own course." The sea answers with a hush. The ship creaks and sighs through the night like an old animal, each timber groaning with its own story. You're curled in the small cabin, knees drawn to your chest, the velvet of the wedding dress bunched awkwardly under the coarse cloak. Salt water drips from the ceiling, cold on your neck. You've escaped the castle, yes, but in the blue-black hush before dawn, it feels less like freedom and more like a question. You can still hear the distant echo of bells from the shore, as if they're tolling not a wedding but a hunt. Up on deck, the sailors mutter and adjust rigging. The scribe dozes against a barrel, one hand still stained with ink even in sleep. You watch him for a moment, realizing how little you actually know about him beyond the brush of parchment and secret notes. In the castle, you never thought to ask his story. There was no room for his story, only yours. Now, with nothing but water around you, curiosity flickers. You want to know who he is when he isn't a shadow at a chapel pillar. A gull cries somewhere above the mist. You climb the narrow ladder to the deck, the boards slick with dew. The horizon is a smear of gray-silver. Wind tugs at your hood, carrying the mixed scents of tar, brine, and the faint sweetness of figs from a merchant crate. You inhale deeply, the air tasting like a blank page. The captain, a woman with a weathered face and a gold hoop in one ear, nods at you but says nothing. Later you'll learn her name is Usebao, a Breton trader with a reputation for smuggling not only silk and spices, but also inconvenient people. Historians still argue whether such networks for female escapees were organized or just coincidences of commerce, but right now she's your lifeline. She jerks her chin toward the bow. Land in 3 days, she says simply, if the wind holds. You clutch the railing as the ship pitches. 3 days to a new shore, or 3 days for pursuit to catch you. Below deck, you and the scribe share the cramped cabin. He's awake now, unrolling a parchment as if it were a map of your future. This port, he says, pointing, is ruled by a count sympathetic to reform. He allows women to petition for annulment if they can prove coercion. His voice is careful, not promising too much. He knows as well as you do that medieval law is a thicket. Canon lawyers debate consent. Bishops issue edicts that lords ignore. Still, it's a chance. You nod, more to yourself than to him. That night as the ship rocks, you dream of the castle corridors twisting like vines, of your groom's thin smile stretching wider and wider, of veils turning into sails. You wake with a start, heart pounding. The scribe sits cross-legged, writing by the glow of a lantern. He glances up. Couldn't sleep, he murmurs. You shake your head. He offers a bit of bread. It's stale but real, and you laugh softly at how the simplest gesture feels like rebellion after years of etiquette drills. There's your first small joke of the section. You nibble and say, "So this is what freedom tastes like, hard crust and crumbs." On the second day, the wind dies. The sails hang limp, the ship lists lazily. The captain curses under her breath and orders the sweeps out. Sailors row in rhythm, muscles straining. You help carry water jugs to them, your velvet sleeves rolled up. A few stare but say nothing. Perhaps they think you're just another runaway servant. You relish the anonymity. It's almost funny. Back at the castle, you were trained to stand still and look desirable. Here, hauling jugs, you feel more yourself. Another small joke rises. At least nobody's arranging my marriage to the oars. In the lull, you and the scribe talk. He tells you he was a minor cleric once, tonsured and trained to copy manuscripts. But he grew restless with church politics, with bishops who thundered about sin while arranging their nephews' benefices. I started writing letters for people who had no voice, he says. Widows, debtors, girls like you. His eyes flick up. It doesn't always work, but sometimes a line of ink can open a door. You tell him about your childhood, how you loved sneaking into the kitchen to taste spices, how you once hid in the dovecote during a thunderstorm. He laughs softly. You were always looking for flight, he says. The word makes you shiver. Outside, a whale surfaces briefly, spouting a plume of water. The sailors point. One makes the sign of the cross. It's a good omen, someone whispers. You store that away like a talisman. That evening, the captain joins you at the stern. She tells you of other girls she's ferried. A novice fleeing a forced profession, a merchant's wife escaping an abusive husband, even a boy who turned out to be a girl disguised as a page. Some make it, she says. Some don't, but the sea at least gives you a horizon. Her voice is rough but kind. You feel a surge of gratitude so sharp it's almost pain. As darkness falls, stars prick the sky. The scribe shows you constellations. That's the North Star, he says, always fixed. You wonder aloud if you'll ever feel fixed again. He's quiet for a moment, then says, maybe fixed isn't the goal. Historians still argue whether the so-called age of chivalry ever really existed or was just a poetic mask over power and property. You think about that as the waves slap the hull. How many of the stories you were told as a girl were masks, and how many choices you might make now that no one has scripted your lines. On the third morning, land appears, a thin green line rising from the mist. Relief and fear tumble together inside you. This is it. The port, the count, the petition for annulment, or maybe just another kind of trap. The captain steers into a hidden cove to avoid notice. You and the scribe will disembark under cover of darkness and travel inland by cart. The plan feels like something from a romance song, yet here you are living it with dirty hands and a pounding heart. You spend the day preparing. The scribe gives you a plain wool dress from his pack. You peel off the wedding gown and fold it carefully, the ship at the hem catching your eye one last time. You consider tossing it into the sea but can't. It's both your cage and your proof. If the count needs evidence of who you were, this dress may speak louder than words. You wrap it in oilcloth. As night falls, you slip into the skiff. The captain rows you to shore herself. Keep your head down, she warns. Not everyone likes reform. She presses a small pouch of coins into your hand. For bread or bribes. You try to thank her, but your throat closes. She just nods once and pushes off. Your feet touch sand. It's cold and damp and real. Above, pine trees loom like sentinels. A track leads inland, rutted and muddy. You and the scribe start walking. Each step feels like a new word in a sentence you're writing for the first time. Halfway up the path, you pause and look back. The ship is already a shadow slipping out to sea. You're alone now except for the scribe and the dark road ahead. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of earth instead of salt. It smells like possibility. You and the scribe trudge along the rutted path until your calves burn. The night has that hollow quality just before dawn, when even owls go quiet. Mud sucks at your shoes. A mist rises from the marsh and curls around the pines. Each step feels like writing a new line you're not sure you know how to finish. You've left the castle, the wedding, and the ship behind, but the future still looks like a blank parchment waiting for ink. At the first bend in the road, a cart waits, its driver a stooped man wrapped in a heavy cloak. He gives a short nod and motions you aboard without a word. You recognize the pattern now. The scribe has a web of helpers, people who risk a glance the other way, people whose names will never make it into any chronicle. Historians still argue whether such informal networks of escape really existed for women in the Middle Ages, or whether the few documented cases are exceptions. But you're sitting on a creaking cart in the dark, and it's very real under you. The driver flicks the reins and the horse starts forward, hooves thudding softly. You huddle under the cloak, your wedding dress bundled at your feet. The scribe sits opposite, watching the roadside trees like a hawk. "This road leads to St. Berth's Abbey," he murmurs. "From there we can take another cart to the count's seat. It's safer than the main highway." You nod, though safe is a word that's lost its edges tonight. As dawn stretches pale fingers over the horizon, you pass tiny hamlets still asleep. Smoke curls from one or two chimneys, a rooster crows somewhere. You wonder what the villagers would think if they knew the bride passing by on their road. Probably they'd bow and call you my lady, not realizing you're a fugitive with mud on your hem. The thought almost makes you smile. There's your first little joke of the morning. The noble lady who can't keep her shoes clean. The abbey comes into view just as the sun breaks through the mist. Low stone buildings ringed by a crumbling wall, a modest bell tower leaning like an old pilgrim. The driver halts. "This is as far as I go," he says, handing the reins to the scribe. Without ceremony, he clambers down and disappears into the trees. You're left standing in the road with your bundle and your heartbeat. Inside the abbey yard, the smell of herbs drifts from a garden. A nun with weathered hands greets you. "Pilgrims?" she asks. The scribe bows. "Seeking shelter," he says. She nods, eyes kind but shrewd. "We take in many seeking shelter." Her tone makes you wonder how many stories she's heard behind these walls. She shows you to a guest cell with a pallet and a jug of water. The door closes softly, and for the first time in days, you're indoors again. You sit on the pallet, staring at the wedding gown folded in your lap. The ship at the hem seems to look back at you, a stitched question. Should you petition the count for annulment, risk public scandal and your family's wrath, or disappear entirely, build a life in some market town under a false name? The options feel both huge and fragile, like stained glass that might shatter at a touch. Later in the abbey's small refectory, you sip thin ale and eat bread with honey. The nuns chant softly in the chapel next door. The scribe leans close. "I've sent word to the count," he says. "We may get an audience within a week." He studies your face. "Are you sure you want that?" You stare into your cup. "I don't know what I want," you admit. The honesty feels like air in your lungs. A quirky tidbit surfaces from your girlhood lessons. Some medieval brides embroidered prayers into their wedding garments to ward off ill fortune. You run your fingers over the ship again and wonder if, by accident, you've done the same. Outside, a breeze stirs the herbs, sage, rosemary, rue. The scent of rosemary hits you hardest, memory of the wax seal on the first secret note. It feels like a thread connecting you to your past self, the girl who dared to dream of escape. The abbess herself invites you to the cloister walk after supper. She's tall, with eyes that seem to see past veils and titles. As you stroll, she says, "Every woman who comes here brings a story, and every story carries a choice. Some stay, some go back, some vanish beyond our records." Her voice is calm, without pressure. You ask if she thinks you should stay. She smiles faintly. "My opinion would only be another net. What matters is which risk feels like breathing to you." That night you lie awake listening to the distant toll of the abbey bell. The scribe sleeps on a mat across the room. Moonlight paints a pale path across the floor. You imagine walking it straight out of the cell and into a new life. But even now you can't quite see what lies at the end. You whisper a half prayer, half promise. "Let me write my own line." On the fourth day at the abbey, a messenger arrives. You're summoned to the count's seat within 2 days. The scribe folds the parchment carefully. "It's time," he says. You feel your stomach knot. This is what you fled for, a chance at annulment, at legal recognition of your choice. Yet the thought of standing before a noble court, your private life laid open, chills you. In the Middle Ages, as you know too well, reputation is both armor and target. The nuns outfit you in a simple gray dress for the journey. You pack the wedding gown and the ship token. Before you leave, the abbess presses a sprig of rosemary into your hand. "For remembrance," she says simply. You blink back sudden tears. You and the scribe take another cart, this one heading south through rolling hills. The countryside unfolds like a tapestry, fields dotted with sheep, hedgerows alive with sparrows, a distant castle tower on the horizon. People glance at you as you pass but look away quickly. To them, you're just travelers. To yourself, you're still a question. By dusk, you reach a market town and find lodging at an inn. The common room hums with chatter. Minstrels sing of knights and ladies, of forbidden love conquering all. The irony makes you almost laugh. The scribe catches your eye, and for a moment you both grin at the absurdity, a ballad about your own life playing while you eat stew with wooden spoons. You whisper your second small joke of the section. "If the singer gets the ending wrong, should we correct him?" Later in the small room above the inn, you watch candlelight flicker on the ceiling beams. Tomorrow you'll reach the count's seat. Tomorrow you'll decide whether to step into the light of law or slip back into the shadows of anonymity. You touch the ship token, the sprig of rosemary, the folded gown, 3 talismans, 3 versions of yourself. Outside, a dog barks once and then is silent. You turn to the scribe. "Do you think I'll win?" you ask. He shrugs gently. "I think you're already winning by choosing." The words settle over you like a quilt. You close your eyes and, for the first time since the cart arrived at the castle gates, sleep without dreaming of veils. The rooster in the inn's courtyard calls you into mourning, but you've been awake for hours. The cart ride today will carry you the final miles to the count's seat. A cluster of stone buildings and towers perched like a hawk over the river. Your palms sweat against the simple gray dress. You've worn no veil, no jewels. You look like a merchant's daughter on a pilgrimage. You hope that will make Thies on you softer. The road narrows to a single lane between hedges. As you approach, you can already hear the bells of the great church that adjoins the count's hall. Its low tolling mixes with the drumming of your pulse. The scribe sits beside you, reading nothing, his thumb running over the edge of a sealed parchment. "Remember," he murmurs, "you have the right to speak." In your head you add, "even if no one listens." Inside the town walls, the smell hits you first. roasted meat from street stalls, beeswax candles from the cathedral, and underneath it all the sour tang of tanneries along the river. It's market day. Peasants press forward with baskets of onions. Children run with strings of wooden beads. The Count's Hall looms above it all, carved lions glaring from the gateposts. You climb down from the cart and your knees almost buckle. A steward ushers you through a side door past tapestries of hunts and saints. The floor underfoot is polished to a sheen. You will wait here, he says, indicating a small chamber with a single bench. You sit, hands clasped, watching sunlight fall through a narrow window. In your lap, the sprig of rosemary trembles slightly. When at last the door opens, you're led not into a courtroom, but into a chapel, high vaulted ceiling, colored light from stained glass washing over the flagstones. At the far end stands the Count, lean and severe, flanked by two clerics. You realize this isn't just a legal hearing, it's a ritual space too. Historians still argue whether medieval annulment cases were truly about consent or mainly about property and power, but standing here you feel how little the categories matter. The Count's voice is calm. You claim your marriage was forced, he says. Your throat tightens. You tell him the story, your family's bargain, the groom you barely knew, the secret messages that gave you courage. You speak in the present tense as if it's still happening, which in some way it is. One of the clerics asks questions about the wedding night. His Latin rolls like gravel. He wants proof of consummation, of resistance, of consent. Your cheeks burn. You give measured answers, neither scandalizing nor lying. A murmur runs through the onlookers, servants, scribes, a few curious townspeople allowed in. You catch the flash of a velvet sleeve you recognize. One of your new husband's cousins, perhaps. He's smirking. At last the Count raises a hand. Enough, he says. You will retire while we deliberate. You're led to a side room. The scribe squeezes your shoulder. Breathe, he says softly. They're not used to women who speak plainly. Hours pass. Outside, bells mark midday, then none. You pace the narrow room, tracing a finger along the carvings in the wood. They're little flowers, but one looks like a ship. The sight steadies you. Finally, the steward returns. The Count will speak, he says. You're ushered back into the chapel. The Count's eyes rest on you. It is clear, he says, that grave irregularities occurred in the making of this marriage. Yet the union has been publicly solemnized, and the families involved have much at stake. He pauses. Therefore we grant you residence at St. Berth's Abbey for 1 year, during which you may choose to return to your husband or petition the church in Avignon for full annulment. The words land like stones. You're free, but only in the narrowest sense. Still, something inside you rises. A year at the Abbey is a year to breathe, to think, to plan. You bow your head. I thank you, my lord. Back in the cart, you and the scribe ride in silence. The road out of town winds between fields of ripening wheat. At last, he says, it's not everything we hoped. You stare at the horizon. It's more than I feared. Night falls by the time you reach the Abbey again. The nuns welcome you back with quiet smiles. The abbess takes your hands. A year is longer than you think, she says. Seeds planted now may bloom. Her words sound like both promise and warning. Days slip into weeks. You join the nuns in their herb garden, learning the uses of sage and rue. You copy manuscripts in the scriptorium, your handwriting steadier each day. You listen to pilgrim stories of saints, of wars, of strange lands. You begin to sleep without clutching the ship token. Yet outside the Abbey walls, life moves on. You hear rumors of your husband's anger, of your family's embarrassment, of minstrels singing a ballad called The Runaway Bride of Valgren. You roll your eyes the first time you hear it from a passing merchant. At least they didn't rhyme my name with Pigpen, you joke to the scribe. He laughs, your first shared laugh in weeks. A quirky tidbit from one pilgrim lodger fascinates you. In some regions of France, runaway brides could claim sanctuary by touching a particular church door ring shaped like a lion's head. You imagine such a ring, heavy and cold under your palm, and wonder if you'd have had the courage to use it. By midwinter, the Abbey's bell tower leans under snow. You find yourself warming to its rhythm: prayer, work, meal, prayer again. You write letters to no one, little confessions folded into the margins of old manuscripts. Today I felt the wind and did not think of leaving, you write one day. Another day. Today I remembered the smell of rosemary and smiled. But freedom has a way of stirring questions you thought you'd silenced. Sometimes at night you walk the cloister and imagine the world beyond the walls. Fairs and tournaments, ships in the harbor, songs by candlelight. You think of the scribe's steady presence, of the risk he took for you. You're not sure what you feel, only that the feeling exists. Spring creeps over the hills. Lambs bleat in the meadows. The abbey garden bursts with green. A royal progress is rumored to pass nearby, bringing with it merchants, jugglers, and news from far away. The abbess gives permission for the sisters to watch from the roadside. You're surprised by a flicker of excitement. You haven't seen a festival since before your wedding. Perhaps it will show you a glimpse of the world you left, or the world you might still claim. That night, lying on your pallet, you run your fingers over the embroidered ship. It feels less like a question now and more like a compass. You whisper to the dark, "Where next?" The silence doesn't answer, but you feel its patience. The day of the royal progress dawns like a painted page from one of the abbey's illuminated psalters. Sunlight glints off dew-wet grass, and a misty gold halo clings to the distant hills. The sisters bustle about with quiet excitement, their black veils like crows, wings against the morning. Even the abbess allows herself a small smile as she hands out coarse wool cloaks. "No running off," she teases in a voice that isn't entirely joking. You catch the edge of a wink. You walk with the other women to the main road. The earth smells of thawing mud and wild garlic. A small breeze carries the faint clang of bells and a scatter of music, shawms, fiddles, a drum. You feel your heart respond before your feet do. The royal progress has always been part theater, part politics, a traveling court that brings spectacle to the countryside while checking on its vassals. For a woman like you, cloistered for months, it feels like a keyhole glimpse into a world still moving without you. Along the roadside, peasants gather, children on shoulders, dogs weaving between legs. You notice how everyone smells of soap and excitement. Even their patched tunics look freshly beat. A cart piled with rushes creaks past. A hawker sells honey cakes from a basket. You buy one with a copper the abbess pressed into your palm. The cake is sticky and too sweet, but the sugar crackles on your tongue like a forgotten language. You laugh softly. The noble lady who can't keep her shoes clean now has honey on her chin too. The first outriders appear, men in livery, banners snapping. Then come wagons of tents, cooks, clerks. Finally, under a canopy of crimson cloth, the king himself, pale and hawk-faced, nodding like a statue come to life. The crowd cheers. You bow with the others, but your eyes are caught by something else. Behind the royal canopy rides a small group of musicians, one of them holding a lute with a familiar emblem burned into the wood. The sight sends a shock through you. Months ago, before the wedding, that emblem appeared at the bottom of one of the secret notes. Could it be the same troubadour? A romantic would say yes. A realist would mutter about coincidences. Historians still argue whether medieval minstrels actually ferried clandestine messages for lovers, or whether such tales are retrofitted myths. You're standing on the road, your mouth tasting of sugar, trying to decide which version you believe. As the procession passes, the lute player glances toward the crowd. For a heartbeat, you think his eyes meet yours. He tilts the instrument just enough that the emblem flashes again. Your pulse thuds. It could be a signal, it could be nothing. You don't wave, you don't move, but a seed stirs in your ribs. After the procession disappears over the rise, the abbess gathers the sisters. "Back to work," she says briskly, yet her glance lingers on you. Perhaps she saw your face change. Perhaps she guesses that something is germinating behind your careful expression. Back at the abbey, the nuns return to their chores. You slip into the scriptorium, but your hand trembles over the quill. You think of the lute, of the emblem, of the week stretching ahead. The annulment petition to Avignon still sits unfinished in your chest like a swallowed stone. Freedom is near, but it's not simple. That night you walk the cloister garden. Frogs croak in the pond, the air smells of wet earth and rosemary. You remember the abbess's words about seeds. You remember your own whispered, "Where next?" Now the question has a shadow of an answer. If the troubadour was indeed your old correspondent, the one who once wrote, "A ship waits for those who dare," then perhaps he's still willing to help. A quirky tidbit from the Abbey's library floats up in your mind. In some towns of Occitania, women could invoke a rite of safe passage if they joined a traveling troupe as an entertainer or assistant. It's a loophole mostly used by widows and orphans, but technically open to anyone who could sing or play. You cannot sing, but you can copy, you can stitch, you can read. Could that be enough? You imagine yourself slipping out during the next stop of the Royal Progress, blending into the tide of cooks and clerks, vanishing into a moving city that leaves no footprints. The thought feels both terrifying and electric. You also imagine staying, finishing the petition, claiming your annulment, emerging from the Abbey a free woman under law rather than rumor. That path feels slower but steadier. The scribe notices your distraction. "What did you see today?" he asks over the evening meal of lentils. You shake your head. "Just a song I thought I knew." He studies you but doesn't press. Perhaps he already knows that the hardest decisions cannot be coaxed. Weeks pass. Letters arrive from your family urging you to reconcile, citing your duty, your future, your salvation. You read them without answering. In the scriptorium, you illuminate a capital S with a tiny ship at its heart. The sisters murmur at your skill. You murmur back that it's just a habit, but each stroke of the brush feels like a footstep toward some unseen harbor. Then one rainy morning, a messenger appears at the Abbey gate. He carries no crest but asks for you by name. He hands you a scrap of parchment sealed with wax impressed with the same emblem as the lute. Your fingers tremble as you break it. The message is simple. The ship is still waiting. Festival of St. John, third night. Your breath catches. The festival is in 2 weeks in the town downriver where the Royal Progress will pause. A midsummer blaze of fire and song, a swirl of masks and markets. Perfect cover, or perfect trap. You fold the parchment and slip it into your sleeve. The rosemary sprig you've kept all this time has dried to a brittle twig. You crush it between your fingers and breathe in the faint scent. It smells like memory, like courage, like risk. At Vespers you stand among the sisters chanting psalms. Their voices rise like a single tide. Yours falters on a line about "the snare is broken and we are delivered." You swallow hard. That night you dream of ships again, but not embroidered ones. Real ships with lanterns swaying, sails like wings. You stand on a quay, the troubadour's hand extended, the scribe somewhere behind you calling your name. You wake before you know which way you turn. The next day you begin to plan quietly in the spaces between chores. You memorize the path to the river, the names of the carts leaving for the festival, the timing of the Abbey's gates. Each piece feels like a bead sliding onto a string. Whether you will pull it tight or let it fall remains to be seen. In the herb garden, the abbess pauses beside you. "The rosemary's nearly done," she says. "We'll plant a new row after St. John's." You nod, unsure if she knows more than she says. She touches your arm lightly. Sometimes the old plant must fade so the new one can root. When she walks away, you kneel in the dirt, fingers pressing the earth. The sun is warm on your back. You think of the festival fire, of the annulment parchment, of the ship waiting in a stitched hem and maybe on a real river. The 3 versions of yourself shift like cards in a hand. The road ahead is no clearer than before, but the air tastes of change. You whisper to the soil, "One more choice." The earth holds your words without judgment. You wake before dawn on the day the Abbey's carts leave for the St. John festival. The sky is still indigo, and a cool wind presses through the shutters. For weeks you've rehearsed the possibilities. Stay cloistered, finish the petition to Avignon, wait for the slow wheel of church law to grind out an annulment, or slip away under the noise of midsummer fires and gamble on a ship that may or may not exist. Both paths are dangerous, but only one makes your pulse quicken in a way that feels like breathing. You dress in the same plain gray you've worn all year, but underneath you've bound a small purse of coins at your waist, the scribe's savings pressed into your hand 2 nights ago. No questions, he said quietly. Just, if you go far enough. You hadn't realized until then that he knew what you were thinking. Maybe he'd known from the moment you saw the loot on the roadside. The carts rumble out through the abbey gate just as the first sun stains the hills. The sisters chatter about the festival, about the king's entourage, about the spiced wine they might be allowed to sip. You keep your eyes on the road, counting turns, measuring distances. The smell of rosemary drifts faintly from a basket of herbs in the cart ahead. It's like a running joke between you and the world now. Every time you're about to leap, the scent appears. By noon you can hear the town's bells and the rising hum of market day. The St. John Festival has transformed the riverside into a riot of color. Tents painted with stars, booths selling ribbons, jugglers tossing torches. Children run with paper crowns. The air tastes of ash and honey, smoke and salt. After months of quiet stone walls, the sheer volume of life feels dizzying. The abbess shepherds the sisters to a cordoned area near the churchyard where they'll watch the official procession. "Stay together," she calls, her voice half lost in the din. You slip into the crowd's edge, heart hammering. Every sense is on alert. The crackle of roasting meat, the bright red of banners, the press of shoulders. It's like moving inside an illuminated miniature come to life, but one where the margins are smudged and you might step out of the frame. Then you see him. The troubadour stands near a fountain, lute slung across his back, speaking to a merchant. He's older than you remembered, sun-creased around the eyes, but the emblem is the same. He doesn't look around. He doesn't give a signal. Just being there is the signal. You start toward him, then stop. What if this is a trap set by your husband's men? What if he's simply another musician who bought a second-hand instrument? Historians still argue whether those clandestine escape stories of ladies and minstrels were real or simply moralizing tales about the perils of romantic folly. Right now you're standing in the footnotes of that debate. You feel a hand on your sleeve. It's the scribe. He must have followed the abbey carts separately. "Decide," he says quietly. His eyes are steady but sad. Once you step away from the sisters, you can't step back the same way. You look toward the abbess. She's talking to a stallholder, her back turned. The crowd surges, a juggler's torch flares, the lute catches the light. This is the moment you've been building for since the castle gates. You walk, not run, walk, past the herb basket, past the children, until you're at the fountain. The troubadour turns. "My lady," he says softly, as if you'd only parted yesterday. "The ship waits downstream. We sail at dusk." He glances over your shoulder. "Do you still wish it?" You almost laugh, third small joke of the section, because what you really want to say is, "No, I came for the honey cakes." Instead you nod. "I do." He leads you through a tangle of alleys toward the riverfront. The scribe follows a few paces behind, silent. You pass booths selling masks, talismans, love charms. One vendor waves a little packet of bridal powder, promising to make husbands gentle. You think of your own wedding night and almost choke on the irony. Down at the quay, a low-slung barge rocks against its moorings. A painted prow in the shape of a swan, patched sails furled. It's no grand galley, more like a floating kitchen garden, but to you it looks like the embroidered ship made flesh. The troubadour helps you aboard. "We have until the last bonfire dies," he says. The scribe steps to the edge of the quay. For a long moment he looks at you. "This is your line to write," he says. "Not mine." He presses a bundle into your hands, the folded wedding gown, the ship token, the dried rosemary. Keep them, for memory or for proof. You want to say thank you. You want to say come with me, but the word's not in your throat. He gives a small, crooked smile and turns back toward the town. The crowd swallows him. The barge slides from the quay, oars dipping silently. The town recedes, banners, bells, smoke, until it's a smudge of color against the green. The troubadour steers with a long pole. You sit at the bow, clutching the bundle. Wind lifts your hair. You realize you're crying, not from fear or relief, but from the sheer strangeness of motion after stillness. As the river widens, the banks grow wild, reeds, willows, herons rising. You think of all the brides who never reached this moment, who stayed locked in halls and beds they didn't choose. You think of the abbess planting new rosemary after St. John's. You think of the scribe's steady eyes. You're leaving pieces of yourself like breadcrumbs. The troubadour hums under his breath a tune you half remember. Where does this go, you ask? To the coast, he says. Then on to a port where names change. He glances at you. No promises, but at least it's your choice. You lean over the side, watching your reflection break in the water. The embroidered ship in your lap seems to sail beside the real one. For the first time since you stepped off the cart at the castle gates, you feel your lungs fill all the way. A quirky fact you once read drifts up now. Some medieval women who escaped forced marriages joined merchant households abroad, using skills in reading or embroidery to carve new lives. It's not a ballad ending, it's a quiet survival. That possibility feels more solid to you than any troubadour song. As dusk settles, bonfire smoke from the festival drifts over the river like a farewell veil. You wrap the wedding gown tighter and look ahead. The horizon is just water and sky, but you imagine small ports, new names, and maybe a room where no one can summon you without your consent. You breathe out. The air tastes of ash and rosemary. For the first time, you're moving under your own wind. The river grows broader with each stroke of the oars. By morning, the barge no longer drifts past villages, but through marshland and wooded bluffs where only the cry of waterfowl punctuates the mist. The troubadour dozes at the tiller, hat over his face. You sit on a coil of rope, gown still bundled against your chest, watching the ripples pattern and repattern like a living manuscript. Your body is sore in a way that feels almost pleasant, a soreness of movement rather than confinement. You keep flexing your fingers as though they still hold a quill. That little habit of writing in your head has turned into a lifeline. You describe the mist, the smell of tarred rope, the faint metallic taste of the coins at your belt. You imagine how a scribe a century from now might illuminate this scene. Perhaps a small gold ship in a border, perhaps you as a tiny figure at the bow. Historians still argue whether the women who fled forced marriages were condemned sinners or desperate pragmatists. You wonder which miniature you would be drawn into. By midday, the troubadour shakes himself awake. We'll reach the abbey's millstream soon, he says. After that, no one knows us. He produces a crust of bread and a wedge of cheese from a sack. The cheese smells faintly of smoke. It's not a feast, he says, but it keeps you upright. You laugh first small joke of the section and say, at least it's not wedding cake. You eat slowly, tasting each bite. After months of institutional meals, it feels strangely intimate to share food on open water. He asks if you've ever been to sea. You shake your head. The farthest I've been from my father's hall is here. He nods. The horizon will surprise you. It's not just a line, it's a mirror. Shows you what you brought along. Later, as he steers, you look down at the embroidered ship on your lap. The tiny stitched sails are stiff with age. You stroke them like a pet, thinking of your mother's hands making the same motion decades ago. That gown was supposed to be a key to alliance, then a shroud for your girlhood. Now it's a passport of sorts. The banks close in again as you enter a narrow stretch lined with willows. Their branches sweep the water like green curtains. You hear hoofbeats above and freeze. Two riders appear on the bluff, mailed men, one holding a falcon. For a heartbeat, you're sure they've come for you. The troubadour tenses, but the riders merely scan the marsh and move on. The falcon wheels and rises. You exhale, a second joke forming in your head. Next time maybe we should wear invisibility cloaks. But you let it die in the mist. Evening brings a change in the air. Salt tang, gull cries. The river is giving way to the estuary. Low tide exposes mudflats dotted with little wooden stakes. Fishermen work in silence, hauling nets. The troubadour gestures toward a cluster of weather-beaten huts. This is St. Florian's Reach, he says. My contact lives there. The barge bumps a makeshift dock. A woman in a patched blue cloak stands waiting. She's middle-aged with strong hands and a gaze like the scribe's steady, assessing. "You're later than you said," she remarks to the troubadour. "The patrols," he shrugs. "The festival," she looks at you. "And this is a traveler," he says simply. She leads you both into a low hut that smells of dried fish and lavender. Over the hearth a pot bubbles. Over the doorway hangs a string of seashells. The woman sets down bowls without comment. You're too hungry to speak until the first mouthful of stew is gone. Then you manage, "Thank you." She nods once. "You have a choice tonight. Hide here until the patrols give up or board a coaster at dawn. It's bound for Brittany. From there, the world is wide." She glances at the troubadour. "And you," he shrugs, "I'll see her aboard." You realize you've been clutching the wedding bundle so tightly your knuckles are white. You loosen your grip. "I want the ship," you say quietly. The woman's eyes soften. "Then sleep a little, you'll need it." She leads you to a back room where a straw mattress lies under a small window. Through it you can see the estuary glimmering in moonlight. For the first time since you fled the abbey, you're indoors without stone walls or rules. You sit on the mattress, untie the bundle. The gown unfurls, pale as milk. You spread it over your knees. It smells of rosemary and river water. You think of all the voices that tried to define you, father, husband, abbess, and of the two who helped you slip their net, the scribe, the troubadour. Their faces hover in your mind like the saints in stained glass, each with a different attribute, a quill, a lute. Historians still debate whether such helpers were motivated by love, pity, or profit. For you, the debate feels irrelevant. What matters is that, in a world built to keep you still, they moved. Sleep comes fitfully, full of images. The castle's high windows, the abbey's herb garden, the scribe at the key. In one dream you're back at the fountain, but everyone's wearing masks. In another you're stitching a new emblem onto the gown, a small open door. You wake just before dawn to the sound of gulls. The woman hands you a coarse cloak to wear over your dress. "Salt hides the scent of the abbey," she says, "and keep your hood up." You wrap the wedding gown in oilcloth and follow her out. The troubadour is already on the dock, speaking to a bearded captain. The ship behind him is larger than the barge, but still nogly, a coaster with patched sails and barrels stacked on deck. The captain eyes you briefly. "Passenger," the woman nods, "pays double for silence." The captain grunts assent. "We sail with the tide." You step aboard. The deck smells of tar and apples. Sailors move like shadows, untying ropes. The troubadour squeezes your hand once. "Beyond this inlet I can't go," he says. "Too many debts." You look at him, surprised. "Then why?" he shrugs. "Because someone once did the same for my sister. She didn't make it. Maybe you will." You want to tell him you're not a ballad heroine, that you might end up mending sails in a Breton port, that freedom is a thin word stretched over hunger and risk. But instead you say, "Thank you." He smiles faintly. "Write a better ending." Then he steps back onto the dock. The woman clasps his shoulder. The two of them stand together as the ship pushes off. The estuary widens and the dock becomes a smudge. You lean on the rail. The embroidered ship under your arm feels heavier now, like an anchor or a promise. You think of the scribe's words, "This is your line to write," and for the first time you believe it. A quirky tidbit drifts up from memory. Medieval sailors often kept small relics or charms stitched into their clothing for luck. You slip the dried rosemary sprig from your bundle and tuck it into your sleeve. The smell rises with the salt air. It's not magic, but it's yours. The horizon ahead is pale rose. The captain calls orders, the sails billow. The ship tilts gently and begins to cut across the channel. You feel your balance shift, your stomach lurch. The troubadour was right. The horizon is not a line but a mirror. You see not just where you're going, but everything you've carried. You exhale steady and watch the coast recede. The gulls wheel. Somewhere beyond that line is Brittany, maybe a merchant household, maybe a new name. You're not free yet, but you're moving under your own wind. That alone feels like a kind of arrival. Dawn stretches into a long strip of pearl gray sky as the coaster noses farther into open water. The coastline dwindles behind you until it's nothing but a smear of green and chalk. The deck tilts gently with the swell. Gull cries fade. Salt stings your lips and the hem of your cloak is damp from spray. You grip the rail and breathe the air in long, slow pulls as if you could drink courage from it. Below deck the smell is all oak barrels and drying ropes. A boy no older than 14 hands you a wooden cup of thin ale. For the queasy stomach, he says, grinning a gap-toothed grin. If you're going to heave, do it over the leeward side, not the windward. You manage a weak laugh, first small joke of the section, and say, noted. You find a spot on a coil of rope near the bow. The embroidered ship sits wrapped in oilcloth at your feet. All morning you watch the sails belly and snap, thinking how your life has become a mirror of this vessel, patched, carrying mixed cargo, making for a port on no one's itinerary but its own. Historians still argue whether these coastal routes were the arteries of clandestine trade in people, merchants, escaped serfs, runaway brides. Looking at the captain's weathered face and the boy's quick hands, you suspect the truth is somewhere between survival and profit. By midday the sea changes color, green giving way to a deep slate. The captain orders the sail reefed. Weather shift, he mutters. The boy ties off a line with a speed that makes you dizzy. Spray hits your face and you taste iron in your mouth. You remember reading, or rather being told by a bored tutor, that medieval people believed storms at sea were stirred by witches or the unquiet dead. A quirky tidbit indeed. Some sailors carried bits of iron nailed into the mast as a ward. You glance up and sure enough, you see a rusty horseshoe nailed just above the sail's boom. Afternoon slides toward evening. The waves grow, not high enough to be dangerous, but enough to throw your stomach off balance. You retreat to a bench by the stern and focus on the horizon. The boy appears again with a strip of salted fish. Chew slow, he says. Salt helps. You nibble and think, Riley, that at least it's not more wedding feasts. Second small joke. From roast peacock to pickled herring, quite the glow-up. The boy blinks, then laughs. You find yourself telling him little bits, not your name, but fragments of castle kitchens and abbey gardens, of the rosemary smell that won't leave you. He tells you about his mother in Rouen who sells candles and how he dreams of becoming a ship's master. It's a strange comfort, this anonymous sharing. No one expects you to be Lady Anything. You're just a passenger with sea-green skin. Night falls hard at sea. No torches, no festival fire, only a spray of stars so bright they look hammered onto black vellum. The boy points out constellations, the swan, the hunter, the sea dog. They'll steer us, he says, better than a compass sometimes. You lie back on the deck, cloak wrapped tight, and watch the sky wheel. The embroidered ship under your head is a lumpy pillow, but for once you don't mind. Somewhere past midnight the captain orders a change of course. The sails creak, the hull groans. You overhear two sailors whispering about the Breton reefs and patrol cutters. You know enough to realize you're still being hunted, even out here. Third small joke. Guess I'm more popular than I thought. It doesn't land with the sailors, but makes you smile in the dark. Morning brings calmer water and a coastline jagged with cliffs. The captain squints. Brittany, he says. If the wind holds, we'll be in St. Matthew by Vespers. He gives you a measuring look. From there, the road forks, market towns inland or the port at Concarneau where no one asks questions. You nod, clutching your bundle tighter. Your freedom is a series of small waypoints, each no larger than a dock, a door, a decision. You watch the cliff slide past. In a niche of rock, you glimpse a hermit's chapel, no bigger than a cupboard, a candle flickering inside. People still build sanctuaries in impossible places. You wonder if you're doing the same, trying to build a moving sanctuary out of scraps and courage. Historians still debate whether the medieval concept of sanctuary applied outside churches and monasteries. You're testing that debate with every mile of salt water. The boy brings you a cup of warm broth as the wind dies. You'll smell land soon, he says. It's like moss and bread. He's right. Even before the harbor appears, a damp, earthy scent reaches you. After days of salt and tar, it's almost intoxicating. You grip the rail and close your eyes, imagining a street where you can walk without a veil, a room where you can stitch without anyone's emblem above your head. By late afternoon, the ship rounds a headland and the harbor of St. Matthew unfolds, a scatter of masts, stone quays, and houses with painted shutters. Bells from the Abbey Tower drift over the water. You realize you've been holding your breath. The captain shouts orders, ropes fly. The ship glides into a berth with a bump. "End of my line," he says. "Mind your feet." You sling the bundle over your shoulder and step onto the quay. Cobbles underfoot feel foreign after days of rolling deck. The boy tips an imaginary hat. "Good luck, lady who isn't," you smile. "And good winds, captain-to-be." He grins and vanishes into the rigging. The harbor smells of fish, peat smoke, and wet stone. People move briskly with baskets and nets, paying you no more mind than any other traveler. That anonymity feels like a gift. You walk toward the market square where carts from inland are unloading cheese, cloth, and, you blink, herbs. A stallholder is arranging bundles of fresh rosemary. The scent rises like a private benediction. You almost laugh aloud. A woman at the stall catches your eye. She's about your age, hair covered by a simple linen coif, but her posture has none of the bend tinward caution you're used to seeing. She's haggling over prices like a merchant, not like someone's property. For a moment, you see a possible version of yourself, one who makes deals instead of vows. She notices your gaze and smiles briefly before turning back to her customer. You walk on, deeper into the town, the embroidered ship heavy against your hip. You have coins enough for a room at an inn, a meal, maybe a place on a wagon inland. Or you could stay near the docks and try to sign on as a scribe for a merchant household. Choices bloom like sails catching wind. You realize the story you've been telling yourself about a single escape into a single freedom has been too small. What you have now is not an ending but a hinge. As twilight settles, you find a bench near the abbey wall and sit, cloak drawn tight, breathing the mixed scents of sea and rosemary. The bells ring for vespers, the same sound you heard in the abbey garden months ago, but here no one calls you to prayer. You are untethered. It's both terrifying and exhilarating. You touch the wedding gown through the oilcloth. In the dim light, it feels less like a shroud and more like a relic of a past self. You wonder if one day you'll cut it up for cloth, stitch a new emblem, make it a banner for someone else's escape. That thought steadies you more than any saint's candle. Somewhere a fiddler starts a tune. Children chase each other around the square. You sit still, letting the noise wash over you, a ghost between two lives but also, maybe, the author of a third. The next morning dawns misty and cool over St. Matthew. You wake in a narrow attic room above the harbor inn, a space you paid for with 2 of the scribe's coins. The roof beams slope so low you can touch them without standing. Through a cracked shutter, you watch gulls wheel over the quay and fishing boats slipping out of the inlet like gray ghosts. Somewhere below, a baker's oven breathes out a warm, yeasty smell that makes your stomach growl. You sit up slowly, fingers brushing the oilcloth bundle. In the half-light, it looks smaller, as if each mile has shrunk its power. You unwrap it, fold by fold, until the wedding gown gleams on the straw mattress like a captured moonbeam. You run your hands over the embroidery, feeling for a clue, a map, a blessing, an answer. Instead, there's only thread and cloth and the faint scent of rosemary. You chuckle softly, first small joke of the section. So much for magical escape gowns. Downstairs, the innkeeper's wife serves you a bowl of porridge and a wedge of cheese. She doesn't ask your name. She's too busy shouting orders at a sleepy kitchen boy. You're struck by the casual authority in her voice. Here, women speak as merchants, bakers, fishers. In your husband's hall, women's voices were a background hum. Here they're a tide. Historians still argue whether Breton port towns gave women more autonomy than inland manors. Sitting at the trestle table with your spoon, you feel like living evidence. After breakfast, you wander the market square. Traders are setting up stalls, barrels of cider, bolts of cloth, crates of salted herring. The rosemary seller is there again, arranging fresh sprigs. She nods at you as if she's been expecting you. Looking for work, she asks quietly. You hesitate. I can read, write, keep accounts, you murmur. And embroider, her eyebrows rise. Then you want Master Hervé, down by the East Quay. Ships, Spices needs a clerk who won't faint at the sight of figures. She glances at your cloak. Tell him I sent you. You thank her and follow the cobbled lane to a low warehouse where bales of wool and sacks of pepper are stacked like fortress walls. Inside, a stout man with a scar across his cheek is dictating to a boy with an ink-stained hand. He breaks off when he sees you. Yes, you swallow. I hear you need a clerk. He looks you up and down. I need someone who can add without stealing. Can you? You nod. Show me. He pushes a tally board and a scrap of parchment toward you. Numbers, weights, conversions from sous to deniers. Your fingers remember faster than your brain. You jot down figures, double-check. He grunts. Not bad. Then almost as an afterthought. And you're not attached to any guild or master. No, you say truthfully. No one owns my work. He studies you for a long moment. 2 weeks trial, he says finally. A cot in the loft, meals at the hall, pay on Fridays. If you vanish with my ledgers, I'll have you hunted. His tone is flat, not threatening, just the rules. You nod. I won't vanish. Inside, you almost laugh, second small joke. At least not without telling him first. That afternoon, you're seated at a long table near an open window, quill in hand, copying manifests. Ships from Lisbon, Bruges, and Bristol come and go. The scent of tar mixes with cinnamon and wool. Your hand cramps, but it's a different ache, one that earns coin, not chains. Outside the window, a gull lands on the sill, cocking its head as if to approve. During a break, you wander down to the quay. A group of sailors are singing a bawdy song about a monk, a fishwife, and a missing barrel. You can't help but smile. It's rougher, earthier than courtly lyrics, but more alive. The boy from the coaster appears, carrying a bundle of rope. Told you the land would smell like bread, he grins. You blink, surprised. You're here for a day, he shrugs. Then back to sea. He gestures at the warehouse. Looks like you found a nest. You nod, for now. That evening, lying on a cot in the loft, you unwrap the wedding gown again. In the dim candlelight, you see it differently. Not a token of captivity, but a ledger of choices. Each stitch a decision to survive, each emblem a record of a road you've left behind. You imagine cutting it apart, using the cloth for cushions, wall hangings, even sails. A quirky tidbit drifts up. Some medieval women turned their wedding clothes into altar cloths after widowhood, a gesture of both piety and reclamation. You smile. Maybe I'll make mine into a tablecloth for accounting, you murmur, third small joke, and close your eyes. Days become a rhythm. Tally, copy, carry, breathe. You learn the ship's names, the smell of each cargo, the way the harbor bells mark time instead of the abbey's prayers. You're no longer Lady So-and-so. You're just a clerk with ink on her fingers and salt in her hair. It's not a ballad ending, but it's steady. It's yours. The autumn storms roll in hard off the Atlantic, drumming the quay stones and rattling shutters. You're used to the sea's moods now. When the wind howls, you tighten the ropes on the warehouse shutters. When the rain sheets down, you light another candle and keep tallying figures. Your quill scratches steadily even as gusts make the flame tremble. You're discovering that survival is often less about grand escapes and more about small consistencies. Master Hervé grumbles about delayed cargoes and rising tariffs, but he notices your steady hand. You don't spook easy, he mutters one morning as he passes your desk. Good. He drops a purse of coins beside your ledger. First month's pay. The weight of it startles you. Not the coins themselves, you've held more, but the fact that they are yours, earned by your labor rather than your lineage. You think of the scribe's savings, of the troubadour's barge, of the risk you took. This is what that risk has purchased, a modest, autonomous life. After work, you walk the harbor. The rosemary seller waves at you, sprigs tied into a wreath for the feast of St. Anne. You buy one, tucking it into your belt. You smell less like a runaway now, she teases. You smile, first small joke, must be the ink, she laughs. Ink washes off slower than sin. You've begun to make small friendships. The boy from the coaster calls from each ship he boards. The innkeeper's wife brings you leftover bread. Even Master Hervé's apprentice, initially suspicious, now consults you on sums. You're building a web of tiny, quiet alliances, Not the grand, coercive ones of noble marriage, but the mutual kind built on exchange and respect. At night in your loft, you still unwrap the wedding gown. It has become a ritual. Sometimes you simply touch it. Sometimes you stitch a new motif into its hem, a gull, a quill, a sprig of rosemary. The gown is no longer frozen. It's a living record of your movement. A quirky tidbit you came across in Hervé's papers floats up. Some Breton guilds allowed women to sign contracts under their own seals if they proved financial competence. Historians still debate how widespread that practice really was. You run your fingers over your embroidery and think, maybe one day my seal could be a ship. One rainy afternoon, Master Hervé calls you into his office. A caravan leaves for Nantes in 3 days, he says. I need someone to carry ledgers and settle accounts. The abbey rents will be paid there, the Duke's customs too. It's a chance to see another side of the trade. He looks at you sharply. Interested. Your heart gives a small leap. Another journey. Another line to write. You nod. Yes. The caravan forms at dawn in the market square. Ox carts laden with wool, barrels of cider, bales of cloth. Teamsters shout, horses snort. You climb into the lead wagon, a ledger strapped under your cloak. Rain misting down, rosemary tucked behind your ear. You glance back once at the harbor, the masts, the gulls, the warehouse window where you've sat so many hours. Then the wagon jolts forward and the cobbles give way to muddy road. The countryside is a patchwork of hedgerows and wind-bent trees. Villages cluster around stone churches, fields dotted with geese. You breathe in the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. The road itself feels different from the one that led you to the castle months ago. Then you were being carried like cargo. Now you're part of the convoy by choice. That difference hums under your skin. At midday, the caravan halts at a roadside inn. You eat bread and cheese with the other clerks, swapping jokes about tariffs and toll collectors. Second small joke, at least toll collectors don't demand dowries. The others laugh. You're starting to sound like them, a person whose complaints are about work, not captivity. The next day, as the road skirts a forest, you spot a ruined manor house on a hill. Ivy climbs its walls, windows empty as eye sockets. A flock of crows rises from the roof. You shiver. Historians still argue whether such ruins mark the decline of noble power or just bad luck with heirs. To you it looks like a warning. All those marriages, alliances, emblems, now hollow stone. You turn away and focus on the living road ahead. By the third evening, Nantes rises before you. Towers, bridges, a sprawl of markets. The caravan crosses a great stone span over the Loire, water foaming below. Bells ring from 3 different churches at once. You feel the same jolt you did stepping off the barge into St. Matthew, a rival possibility, a hinge swinging open. Master Hervé's contact meets you at a riverside warehouse. You hand over ledgers, witness the exchange of coin, sign your name at the bottom of a contract. The ink pools dark and sure. A quirky smile spreads across your face, third small joke. So this is what freedom smells like, ink and wet wool. No one laughs, but you don't mind. That night you stay in a guest room above the warehouse, window looking out over the river. Lanterns bob on barges. Music drifts from a tavern. You sit by the window with the wedding gown across your lap. The embroidery catches the lantern light like tiny constellations. You're not a ballad heroine rescued by love. You're a clerk carving a life one ledger, one road, one stitch at a time. It's quieter than the songs, but far more real. As you drift toward sleep, you think of the scribe, the troubadour, the abbess planting new rosemary. You imagine sending them a letter, no names, just a line. I am alive. I am moving under my own wind. You close your eyes and let the thought rock you like the tide. The caravan rolls back into St. Matthew under a pale winter sun. Sea spray tang hangs in the air even this far inland, and gulls circle above as if they've followed you from the coast. You climb down from the wagon and your boots hit the cobblestones with a sound that feels like punctuation. A sentence closing, a new one beginning. Your ledger is lighter now, contracts complete, but your pockets are heavier, payment in coin, and more importantly, in confidence. Master Hervé nods at you from the warehouse door. Back in one piece, he remarks, and the account's balanced. There's almost a smile in his beard. Not bad for someone who was just passing through. He hands you a folded parchment. Your next assignment is optional, he says. Take a week, think. When he turns away, you realize this is the first time anyone has offered you choice without a hidden catch. You wander the harbor front. Winter stalls sell chestnuts and smoked fish. Children skate on a frozen puddle, laughing. A jongleur sings about a princess who escapes her tower disguised as a goose girl. You grin. Mainstream history books rarely mention it, but itinerant performers often recycled the same escaped bride motif for centuries. Historians still debate whether those songs reflected actual patterns of runaway women or simply wishful thinking. As you drop a coin in the jongleur's cap, he winks, as if to say, "I know your secret." At dusk, you climb the bluff above the harbor where a tiny chapel stands. From here you can see both the sea and the inland road, two paths you've walked. You sit on the low stone wall, wedding gown in your lap. It's grown heavier with embroidery, gulls, quills, rosemary, waves. The fabric is a palimpsest of your own making. You run your fingers over a newly stitched compass rose. It's not pointing anywhere in particular, just outward. Inside the chapel, an old woman lights candles for travelers. She offers you one. "For safe roads," she says. You smile. "For chosen roads," you answer. She chuckles. "Chosen roads need candles too." You place the taper on the altar and watch the flame steady itself. It glows like a small heartbeat in the dim. Back outside, the air smells of salt and wood smoke. You think about the girl who once arrived at a castle gate, veiled and trembling, and about the woman now sitting on a bluff above her own city. Your life is still modest, still precarious, but the axis has shifted. You are not property moving from father to husband. You are a person moving through the world. That difference is everything. You take out a scrap of paper and begin a letter, not to the scribe or the troubadour specifically, just to anyone who needs to read it someday. I was promised. I was exchanged. I stepped off the path. I am still here. You fold it and tuck it into the gown's hem, one more hidden message among many. The wind lifts the fabric slightly, as if approving. Night falls slowly. The harbor lights come on, bobbing reflections in the black water. Bells ring for Compline from the abbey on the far hill. You remember the abbess planting rosemary, and you picture the seedlings now under frost, waiting for spring. Freedom, too, can winter quietly before it flowers. You rise, brush off your skirt, and start back down the path. Each step is unhurried, deliberate. You're not sneaking anymore. You're simply walking. A third small joke escapes your lips. Guess I finally learned how to elope with myself. No one hears it but the gulls. As you reach the quay, a ship's captain calls for clerks to sign on for a spring voyage to Bordeaux. You pause. Another ledger, another road, another sea. Not tonight. Tonight you'll sleep in your loft with the window cracked for the sound of waves. But you know the choice will still be there in the morning. That, more than coin or song or even love, is what you've won. The power to decide when and where to move next. You step into the glow of the harbor lamps. The rosemary wreath at your belt brushes against your hand, fragrant and stubborn in the cold. You breathe it in, and for the first time in months you feel the word bride lose its chains and become simply woman. You climb the stairs to your loft, light a candle, and hang the gown where the breeze can catch it. It sways gently, like a sail waiting for wind. The harbor grows quiet as the last carts creak away and the tide slides back into darkness. Lanterns gutter and go out one by one. Above, a soft salt mist rolls over the rooftops, blurring hard edges into velvet. You settle into a chair by your little window, the wedding gown a pale drift across the wall, and listen to the hush. In the candlelight, the stitches you've sewn look like faint stars, a sky you've made yourself. Your breath slows. Outside, ropes knock gently against masts, a sound like someone tapping on a drum far away. The smell of rosemary rises each time you shift, green and clean, cutting through the sea air. It feels as if the whole town is exhaling with you, a collective sigh after a long story. You picture the abbess's garden under frost, the troubadour's barge rocking on black water, the scribe's ink drying on a page, small lives, still moving, still choosing. In this dim room you're safe for the night. No watchman knocking at the door, no wedding guests waiting, no forced vows. Just a quill, a candle, a quiet street below. You can almost hear the faint laughter of a jongleur drifting on the wind, a reminder that tailies end but people go on. Let the images fade now, the castle, the embroidery, the road. Let them dissolve like mist until only the sound of waves remains. Your eyelids grow heavier, your breathing finds a slow, even rhythm. You've traveled far with this story. It's time to rest. Close your eyes, let the harbor lights dim behind them and slip into your own chosen dream. Sweet dreams.